Well, welcome back, Jess. The last time we prepped our stock, we jointed one face, squared up an end, and ran it through the planer to get them parallel and flat. Today we're going to rip them into strips and then glue those strips back together to begin our cutting board. So up here, this cutting board is what we call a face grain. So it's just strips glued together the end to end, and we're going to glue that up first. But then, because you want an end grain cutting board, we'll then cross cut these pieces and then flip them on end and put it all back together. So it's going to take 2 glue ups to do that rather than 1,
okay.
But that's basically what we're looking to do. But before we get started, we got to talk a little bit about safety. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove my watch, because we don't want any jewelry hanging off our wrists. We don't use gloves in the shop, even though we're handling wood that might give us splinters, because if the glove gets caught, it can drag your hand into the tool, and we don't want that.
No way.
We don't want, I've got my hearing protection here, but we don't want dangling necklaces. You've got yours tucked inside the shirt. That's excellent. And if we were in a cooler environment where we were wearing long sleeves, I always like to roll them back up onto the forearms. We don't want anything that could dangle or get caught in any of the machinery. And then, of course, we're going to have hearing protection and eye protection.
Yep. Check, check.
In the shop, your brain is the biggest safety device you've got. If you use your brain and think about what you're doing and are careful, you'll usually be safe. What we're going to do is just go ahead and cut these strips into like 1.5 inches wide. And then when we go to glue them up, we'll alternate the walnut and the maple. And then when we re-glue it back together, we can offset those so it becomes like a checkerboard pattern.
Great.
All right, cool. Let's get started with that. So we're gonna use the grippers to do the cutting. And we're going to first set the rip fence here. There's a scale on this side that tells you what your distance is that you're cutting. So we'll go ahead and set for 1.5 inches. And then in order to set the gripper up, we have the safe rip index here on the back of the gripper. So the cursor that's here, when you move it back and forth, that tells you where your center leg is. And we don't want to cut the center leg. So at 1.5 inches, we're going to want that not showing under the cursor. So we'll tighten the leg there, and now we can go ahead and make those cuts. The 1/2 inch leg will be holding the part we're cutting, the main leg will be holding the other half, and we'll make our way through. So let's get ready to do that, and I'm going to pull out a second gripper so that we can use 2, and we'll discuss the hand-over-hand technique.
Great.
All right, so Jess, what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is bring the blade up to the proper height. And here you'll see we're going to raise the blade up so that the tooth is just about 1/2 to 3/4 of the way up above the material when you're getting ready to cut. That's about correct for a combo blade like this. We should probably be using a ripping blade, but a combo blade does both cross cut and rip cuts equally well, and this will be perfectly fine for this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our gripper, and just like at the jointer, we're going to have one in each hand, and we're going to feed through. And as your grip passes the blade on the first gripper, you can take it off. The second one's going to go through, and then we'll bring the first one back around if we have to. This isn't that long. We can probably do it in 2, but we'll see how it works out. Both grippers are set up exactly the same. So whether you have to do 2 or 3 or whatever, it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about which one's going to be last.
Okay.
And then what you're going to do is when you're standing here, leave a little bit of room between, you're not going to stand directly behind the blade. You want to be a little bit to the left of it here so that if something does happen, you're not in the path of a kickback. We also have our riving knife here, which is set up to prevent the blade from being pinched if the kerf should close. I don't think that'll happen with this material, but you never know, and that's part of the insurance policy. So I'm going to start up the vacuum. We'll start the saw. I'll do one, and then you can do one. Now when I push, I'm going to be holding down onto the board. I'm going to be pushing forward with my gripper, but I'm also pretty good rip.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of tool mark there. So we'll probably go ahead and joint this a little bit later just to make the joints clean. And you can see if we try to put this back together, there's a little bit of gapping. So the board is moving a little bit as we're cutting it. You're releasing some of the stress that's in the board. So joining it back together, it'll make a clean cutting board. The other thing is, unlike the joiner, you don't have to worry about transferring your grip over to the other side. Your grip should be pressing down back here because we want to get it through the blade. When you get through the blade, if you can, it's a little bit of a technique, but you'll notice I brought the two pieces back around. You're a little shorter, your reach isn't as long as mine here. You may not be able to do that. That's okay. Let the boards fall off the back. Don't try to reach across the blade or anything like that.
Okay.
So we're gonna make sure there's no dust or dirt. You're gonna start with the board tight against the fence, the gripper here, and then you're gonna just one hand and then follow through the other. When you lift this, come straight up off.
Okay.
All right, Jess. Now, one of the things I've noticed, again, I'm much taller than you are. I don't have any problem pushing these boards through, but I've got the reach with my body to keep the pressure down here. You're having a little bit of trouble with that, as we've seen. So we're going to go ahead and use the gravity heel for the gripper, and we're going to mount it right back here. And the way the gravity heel works, obviously, if we had a heel here that was fixed, that doesn't work because your gripper isn't actually touching the board properly. But by loosening that slightly, now it moves out of the way when you're in the middle of the board, but it drops down to hook the end, and that will help you push through.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
I love how there's a solution to
There's
help me
always
out.
a solution.
Awesome.
So we're going to set up both of these gravity heels with the gripper. In this case, we're cutting 1.5 inches thick, so there won't be any issue with cutting through the gravity heel.
I see.
But it is designed to be sacrificial. So if we were making a narrower cut, I would just let the blade go right through it. But what's going to happen now is when you go to, the first one isn't going to matter, but when you go to push the second one through, your gravity heel is going to drop down and you won't have that gripper sliding forward on you. And so we're going to be able to do that right now. Now the other thing is, because of now that we're beyond the end of the blade, we don't want the gripper to be tipping. That's always a bad thing. So we're going to drop the balance support down on both sides. It must have locked up when it dropped. So we're going to drop the balance support down and lock it in on both of the grippers. And that way, because obviously you don't want to mess with this while you're in the middle of a cut. So, but this will keep your gripper stable while you make the cut. So once again, you're going to do the same cut, but this time when you bring the second one back around, let it drop down there, and that'll be your second pass, and you should be able to push right through.
Cool.
So let's start with that and see if that works better for you.
Okay.
And this is something that, for anybody who has trouble reaching across the table or just doesn't want to, just leave that there for the moment. Start with this one in your left hand.
Okay.
And then after you turn the saw on, you can bring this one back around.
Got it. All right. Let's see how it goes.
So that did work a lot better. All right, Jess. So in this case, you'll notice that the maple is pretty homogeneous. There's not a lot of outstanding grain. I mean, you've got this bit there that we might want to put somewhere else. The walnut, on the other hand, does have a distinct and pronounced grain pattern. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and start setting these pieces together. And like we'd mentioned before, we're going to alternate them. But then once we get them, basically set together, we're going to look at them and we're going to decide what we like or don't like with grains. And we can flip them around, move them, do whatever, and make it work the way we want to. So that's a pretty good sized cutting board. It'll be roughly the same size when we're done, although we can trim it back, and we will trim a little bit off it. So what I'm talking about here is I don't see any real blemishes. There's a little bit of a pin knot there and something there. So if you're going to have that sort of thing, they should all be on the same side. So this, we would put those on what would be the bottom of our cutting board. And we can look at this one and see if it's, see, that's the one we flipped over. I would rather have that than this, so we'll keep that like so. And then the other thing we can do is if we take one of these away, actually, no, we've got one more, so that's good. Because what we want now is we want it to be not even, right? Because what we're going to do is when we cut these strips, we're going to reverse them, and that'll give us the checkerboard pattern. So it's good that we have the right number of pieces here. But you'll also notice that, like this one, if I press it back here, there's a little bit of a gap there, and again, we've released some stress in the wood when we were doing this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll joint these pieces one more time on each face. What we'll actually do is joint one face and then run them through the planer for just a light pass so that they're all the same, but then we know when we put them together, we don't want to see any gaps here, even small ones. We could crush them out with a clamp, but as we discussed last time, the problem is if you're applying so much pressure to close the gaps, you're actually building stress into your cutting board. And there's no reason to do it. So we're going to work this through. And again, on this cutting board, it doesn't matter so much about the grain pattern itself. I've got a little bit of sapwood here, less there, so I'd probably use this face. But sometimes when you're gluing up smaller boards to make a larger panel, you don't want a very noticeable grain line. And so you'll kind of play with them and move them around to get the best grain pattern. This looks pretty good, and I think it's pretty good to work with. I'm going to grab a pencil. And we're going to mark the pieces because we like them the way they are now. So we're going to mark them so that when we go to reassemble this, we can do it in the same order. And basically, if you do a delta from top to bottom, then when we go to put these back together again, we'll know that that one goes there because you can line up the deltas back up. Now, see, that one doesn't go there, and that one doesn't go there. So there. So that's why we do that, so we can line this all back up. It doesn't really matter if they're aligned this way, but in this case, it's just a matter of making sure that we've got them back in the order we wanted them in the first place.
Yeah, smart.
So the next thing we're going to do is go to the jointer, and we're going to take one light pass off of one face of each of these, and then we'll go over to the planer, and we'll take one light pass off the other face of each. All right, Jess, so again, we're going to joint these edges. There's a little bit of tool mark here, and there's, a little bit of gap. We want to get rid of all of that. So we're going to take a very light pass, maybe a 30-second or a little less even. And in this case, we're going to use the gripper to go because these are narrow, and the grip blocks that we used for the full boards would be a little tippy right here. So again, you're going to keep one in each hand. We'll put the flat face against the fence here. And so you're going to have one, and then you're just going to follow through, and same as before. We're going to start here. You're going to transfer your force to the other side, and you're going to let it grind through. So let me fire up the dust collector, and we'll do one. Hand on, everything tight, and then you're going to find that this is very easy to do. Because it's narrow and we're taking a light cut. But again, we're going to want to be watching for the grain direction. And we'll want to mark the face so we know which way to go through the jointer. everything should be prepared. We had marked these boards previously, so now you're going to need to stand them on end, with the lines up, and then rearrange them back into the original setup we did.
Okay. Should be quite easy. That, and this one here. And there we go.
Cool. All right. So the next step is going to be just to glue all these together. Now, notice that there's literally no gapping in here. Okay? There's no spaces. That's exactly what we want. You don't need a whole lot of clamping pressure here to hold those together while they dry, and we don't want it because, again, we don't want to build stress into our design. We've just spent a lot of time getting rid of stress, making these all line up. So this will be absolutely perfect, and next time we get together, we'll set it up and we'll get these clamped together, glued up, and then we'll be ready for the next step.
Right on.
Cool.
Cool.
Nice work.
Exciting.